Welcome back to Her Expat Life. We are the YouTube channel that is dedicated to bringing you all the information that you need as a female entrepreneur, digital nomad, expat, or someone who's just looking to expand her life internationally. We have a host of services on offer for you, so make sure to visit our website, herexpatlife.com, and to see the full scope of our offering. Here on this channel, we like to speak to inspirational women, businesswomen, entrepreneurs, and women who can serve our community in all spheres of life. And today we have someone with us who is not only an entrepreneur, but is also a PR wizard. So we are going to speak today about the importance of public relations. What is public relations? Why it's important for your small business, and how you can maximize your public relations footprint with limited budget, as a lot of entrepreneurs have to watch their spending. So today we have Rachel Pipan with us, and Rachel is the managing director and founder of Maneuvre, an Amsterdam-based strategy firm dedicated to guiding visionary companies and founders on growth and communication. She has devoted her career to helping brands transform complex concepts in crypto, blockchain, AI, and other innovations into accessible experiences for their buyers. So, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a big fan of Her Expat Life.
Thank you. Thank you. We really do appreciate your support.
Yeah.
So, Rachel, please can you tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey? How did you become the MD and founder of Maneuvre?
By being pushed by a lot of people to do it. It's great when you have those people in your background. But I have to say, I have always identified as a square. I never thought I'd work for myself. I never really identified with the term entrepreneur. I thought I'd have, a stable job at a big company, doing PR, big agency forever. And so to be sitting here now feels both funny and odd, but I got here really because of people pushing, or rather me being pushed into situations that then turned out quite well. And so I have to say, if you're sitting here thinking, should I move to Europe, or should I work for myself, or should I start a company, and you feel like you're being pushed in that direction, you're like, I don't know if that's safe or if that's me. I feel you. And that was my experience. But previously, before this chapter of my life, I was living in Washington, D.C. I had been working at a big PR agency, and then I'd gone to work at a Bitcoin, digital currency startup, who was headquartered in Amsterdam. And truly, it was not being on the same time zone as my colleagues, where I finally asked 3 years in, would it be easier if I was in Europe? Living in Europe sounds kind of nice and kind of cool. And they said, yes, we'd love that. And that, I think, was the first step into becoming a founder and starting my own company and living in Europe. The door opened and I said yes. But even that's a bit safe, right? You get a job and you move to Europe, you move to another city, which I know is a service that you guys offer. I highly recommend, if you're wanting to move to Europe, start doing so while working for a company is a nice way to do it. You get to explore the city, decide what you want to do, but you're also not also working for yourself and figuring out the whole entrepreneur thing. And so that's what I did. And I moved to Amsterdam. And, long story short, as a storyteller and in communications and PR, I loved working at a startup because there's so much to say. But as the company got more mature, there was a little bit less to do. And I started getting asked and approached, oh, could you do this for our startup or this project or something else? And technically I couldn't, right? Because I had a job. And that was, I think, the push to say, maybe you should be your own company. Maybe you should be a consultant. Maybe just be a freelancer. Just start. And I did, because in Europe, I'm an American. I could be on the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty. And I started a freelancing business, which I scaled because of demand and success. Now I'm a full-on employer, European employer, Dutch company, founder of Maneuvre. I also have a wonderful co-founder who helps run all of our operations, and I do all of our clients, PR side of things. But yeah, I got here because I just took what at the time felt like big but not too scary steps. Go from an agency, go to a startup. Go from DC, go to Amsterdam. Go from working to freelancing. Go from freelancing to consulting. Go from consulting to employing. And then now I'm here talking to you.
What an amazing journey. It's so exciting. Females talk about their path when it wasn't super clear in their minds that that was what they were going to be doing. Because a lot of people will tell you, oh, I've always dreamt about being an entrepreneur, or always knew it was for me. So it's quite motivating to hear that somebody, kind of figured out along the way that this was their journey instead of having it all clearly mapped out. So yeah, and Maneuvre is doing great things. You really scaled up well. I know there's some exciting things happening in the future, which you'll share with us when the time comes. But yeah, congratulations on that, taking that risk,
Thank you.
and it's definitely worked out.
Yeah, no, Sue, thank you so much.
So, Rachel, let's maybe break this down a little bit more because people hear the term public relations, but unless you've studied it or are in the industry or have a little bit of a marketing communications background, you might not know what on earth it is. So, let's take it back to simple terms. What is public relations and how is it different from other forms of marketing?
Public relations has not the best reputation. I don't know whether to blame Sex in the City or every other TV show that's ever had a PR person in it, Scandal. The easiest way to understand what is public relations versus what is communication, what is marketing, what is self branding, right? In a lot of situations, especially if you are an entrepreneur working just with yourself, if you're a new founder, a lot of it's the same, right? You want more people to know about you, and what they know about you, you want to be positive. Some people call it marketing, some people call it comms, some people call it PR. As your company gets bigger and as you get more established, then PR starts to really become a machine of its own. And the example I'd like to use is I am a 30 something woman living in Europe, and Toyota wants me to buy one of their cars. Marketing is Rachel's 30 something young woman. This is the city that she lives in. This is her income range. She wants this many cup holders. She should get a Toyota RAV4, right? That is the product we created for her. We are market. She is the market for this product. So we're going to put a bunch of ads in front of her to make sure she gets that car. Whereas public relations is I'm deciding what brand of car I should even start looking at. But I remember seeing that Toyota had ranked really highly on like a safety report, or I'd seen a piece of news saying they were sponsoring like an engineering program at a university in the country that I live in. That is public relations. That's less specifically this car and more I have a positive thought about that company, and it's a positive like association and reputation in my mind. And that's also, I think, where the term communications comes in. An advertisement is a form of communication. A press release is a form of communication. Public relations is communication. And I think it's a nicer term, which is why we say communication, because PR isn't doesn't always feel like you can do as much with it. It's more than just press releases. It's all forms of communication.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the idea of public relations or the perception of it because I think a lot of those shows show a very particular niche, which is maybe crisis communication, which is
Yeah,
part of it. But like you said, it's so much more than that. You know, there are elements about corporate social investment and CSI
yeah,
sponsorships, reputation management in general. Just relationships with the press and with the media, you know, to build those relationships. So it's so much more than just, you know, like trying to cover up some shady
yeah.
deals that
Have the
some
big,
big
sexy press
corporation is
conference.
yeah.
Big lights, and then it also harms. I find it harms, like especially like female entrepreneurs and female founders, because you think, oh, well, I can't afford a big New York PR agency, or I don't have. I'm the only employee. I can't have like just a PR person, so therefore, okay, that I can't do this thing to scale my company up and until I'm at that point where I can afford a $20,000 retainer. So then you don't do anything. You don't do this kind of communication, which actually the earlier you start, the better set up you are for success. So I'm here to say my side quest in life, I have a few, but one of them is like more women, even if you are just working for yourself, huge accomplishment, you need to have some kind of public communication strategy because it makes everything else that you're doing easier.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about female startups and businesses in particular. So, what unique challenges do female startups and small businesses face in terms of public perception, and how can PR help address these challenges?
Many challenges that female led businesses, female founders, female startups face in terms of public perception. And it's a double-edged sword. So one of these inaccurate perceptions is you need to be doing your job. I find a lot of female founders also know and feel that they feel responsible for the money that they raise and the people they employ. So they put their head down and they scale their company, they build products, they hire people, they do the work, and then they lift their head up to say, okay, I've done the work, we've accomplished something, now we can talk about it. Because if you start doing it too early and start being self-promotional early, investors, other audiences may say, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you on a TV show? You need to go back to work. You need to go, make some money. And then you can have the luxury of, talking about yourself. And I think another reason it's a double-edged sword is because I feel like female founders are responsible. They are going to put their head down and they are going to build their company and then start to talk about it. But that's harmful. It's harmful for there to be a public perception that because a woman is out there sharing her lessons and stories, even at an early stage, that she's somehow not doing her job, because we need that information as well. Male founders and male-run companies do it. But it's also harmful for that company as a whole, because the less you capture, the less exists. Like, you can say we've been around for 10 years. We can say we won, we accomplished this and achieved this and scaled this and did this. But unless you've communicated about it regularly, it's sort of just your word against what you can find on the internet. And that means it's harder to then get attention when you do want it. So that's a very harmful perception of female founders and female companies, that if you're talking about yourself, talking about or working on your business instead of in your business, that you're somehow being irresponsible. You're not. It's one of the most responsible things that you can do. Other harmful perception of female-led businesses and female entrepreneurs and female founders is, of course, just the being female. So are you less serious? I have worked with female founders who have been asked by investors and by partners, like, are you going to just have another baby? What, they ask about your marital status. Everything that you think and that we see in television shows, like, that is inappropriate, happens. You go to a conference, you meet with a potential investor, things are going really well, and it turns out they think it's like a date, not them backing your company. Like, it absolutely happens, and it still happens, which is insane. And so this public perception that female founders aren't powerful, scary, and well on their way to world domination are instead maybe like romantic partners or just moms, pervasive. And it's still here, unfortunately.
Okay, so this leads well into my next questions. How does effective public relations and communications contribute to building credibility and trust for female entrepreneurs? Because it sounds like this is a problem. So in what ways does having a communication strategy and a team, or just kind of some plan in place, how does this help build credibility and help women get taken more seriously in this space?
Absolutely. A public relations strategy, a communications strategy, and it's also okay if that strategy is post on LinkedIn once a week. Like, it can start small, but a good strategy or a regular strategy builds credibility because you tell the story. You collect the data points, you collect your wins, you tie them together with how they happened, why it's a success, and then you put it out there, and you put it out there regularly. So if in 5 years' time, when you're even more successful, there's history, even if that history starts just by what you are posting or sharing. And the reason why it builds credibility is, as you start getting more attention, someone is going to tell that story. They might at least tell it in their own head when they start looking you up. The best way you can protect yourself is do the hard work for them, pre-chew their food, do their own homework. This is what I've done. This is what we've achieved recently. And of course, everyone will know, well, that's the company saying it. That's her saying it. She's biased, but everyone's biased. You start by building your own credibility by giving your own story the respect it deserves, which is a platform. And the other reason it builds credibility is just longevity. By the nature of the fact that your story exists, you put it on your website, you put it on your LinkedIn, you have a YouTube channel, right? You do interviews, you write blogs. Just by being present, you can't backdate this stuff. So in, again, 5 or 10 years, you have more credibility because people can see, oh, she has been working on her company. She's been building her brand for this long. I love that Beyonce song where there's the audio of her band showing up, to do, I think, at a contest. It's like, someone captured that. They saved that. That shows how long she has been working at being the best. But unless somebody captured it and saved it, you don't have that evidence. So another way to just build credibility is have a timeline.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and owning your narrative, I think, as well.
Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
don't, claim your story, and if you don't claim your voice, someone else might do it for you, and then it's really hard to fix perceptions. I think this is something important that people who work in communications know this. It's much easier to set the tone than to come in afterwards and try to change people's minds about something. So I think it's really
Totally.
important for female entrepreneurs to realize that, like, you got to own your brand and your voice and your story from day one, because someone might decide to do that for you or against
Yeah.
you. And then you're cleaning up a mess instead of having that foundation of, oh no, but my brand already has a presence and people know who we are and what we stand for and our values and our successes and our stories. So I think it's an important one for people to think about and not to underestimate how powerful that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it has a lot of correlations, honestly, to moving abroad because
Mm.
you move abroad and everyone thinks that your life is very glamorous. You're like, it is glamorous. I do have cute coffees by the canals in Amsterdam, but also I completely failed to be able to communicate with my neighbor who picked up my package for me by mistake, right? Like, but what do you put online? What are you putting on your Instagram and on your story? You're putting your cute coffee, you're romanticizing your life because it's what helps you remember, like, I am in the middle of doing something great and amazing. No, not all of it's great, but I'm capturing, at least for now, what is great. And then you're defining that. You're telling your story of your move to Amsterdam, your move abroad. Similarly, when you run a company, you have to romanticize it. You have to capture it because otherwise, no one's going to do it for you. And I don't know really what's worse. No one notices and no one does it for you. So there's just no story. Or, like you said, they do it for you and it's not great. And then you have to do like back cleanup later. So, yeah, to summarize it, it's like romanticize your own life, capture your own wins before somebody does it for you, before nobody does it for you.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. And I think it's also quite motivating to, like I used to be a publicist and I remember just the joy of our clients and the people that we worked for, just for them to see an article written about them in their favorite newspaper or their favorite magazine or their favorite blog post. You could literally see how much it motivated them to
Yeah.
keep going. So I think it's
Yeah.
also, it's small little markers of success that you just feel seen and you feel understood and recognized as well, which I think is
Yes.
quite motivating within itself.
Yes, yourself be seen, and then also let yourself be seen how the world could see you. When you move
Mm.
abroad, it feels hard. You sort of feel like a failure, like every day, a little bit for a while until probably year 2 or year 3, I mean, depending on how much help you have. If then it feels a little bit less like that, but it's hard. But if you then you go home and you're talking to like your parents' friends, and they're like, you live in Europe. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. What is it like? And you're like, oh my, I'm the girl that moved to Europe. Wow. Like that's so you finally get a moment to see how the world sees you. And it's the same when you start a company, even if it is a company of one. Tell a story, say a little bit fake it till you make it, romanticize it, because that is, in your best light, how the rest of the world will see you and will see your company.
Okay, so can you provide us some examples of successful PR strategies specifically tailored to female-led businesses? Maybe something you've worked on or a client of yours that you've had. Can you share something that stands out?
Some success stories from women-led companies PR. Well, so there is I unfortunately can't share client names because of NDAs. Always get NDAs, by the way, if you start a company in a business. Great document. Side note piece of advice. But there, for example, like there was a great woman that we work with who led a services business. So like just how I run a firm, like she also ran a firm, which I think as well many entrepreneurs and founders, not just women, think, well, if I founded a services company, it's not a cool, sexy AI startup. Do I do PR? Do I do communications? Or is that only for like bigger and more serious companies? The answer is you are a serious company. You're a services provider. Like if H&R Block does PR, like you should do PR. But because of that, as a services provider, you think, well, I want to be able to get clients and I want to have a good reputation, but I am not the spotlight. The people I work with are the spotlight. And that's a big obstacle that if you are a consultant or a freelancer, one to get over, because you also don't want to feel like you are taking spotlight away from the people that you work with. It was exciting because she had a really powerful story. She had, moved to the US from Europe. She'd founded her company. She'd had a background, in social media. And when she told her story, she didn't give it very much justice. And then I did this other thing, and we said, no, like you're a founder. You're using like your immigration experience. You're weaving together all of this work that you've done, and that is what makes you so good at what you do. And she got published. An article by her about her experience got published in a major mainstream media outlet that we helped her come up with and helped her write. That was, again, one of those moments that you said as a publicist. It's, oh, I have a story to tell, and it is interesting, and I bring value, even though I haven't founded some crazy cool fintech or anything else. And that is nice because that is just part of your communication strategy. Your PR strategy can just be find an expert, find an external person to help you weave all those data points from your career and your life together to give you that powerful story. Because if it's good enough and original and interesting enough, which it is, if you can just put the right flavor on it, people do want to hear it. Your opinion or your experience can be published. You can get invited to be on podcasts and invited to speak on stage. Your strategy should be get that story together first, and do not discount, even if you are just a services provider. Like you haven't done something so big. Another PR communication strategy that works really well for women founders, entrepreneurs, again, not necessarily having to have founded a very cool startup or anything else, is and by be organized, I mean between your website and your LinkedIn and your social platforms and whatever the search results are when someone Googles you, make sure they're organized. Make sure your website is easy to go through. Make sure it's easy to understand your biography, where you've worked previously, what you've done. Capture those wins, like I've talked about, because if you listen to a podcast and think, someone on there, that's my story, or like if she could be on it, I could also be on it. Like, am I capable of doing this? The answer is almost definitely. But the question is, everyone is so busy. So if a podcast host, if you email them and say, hey, I'd really like to have you on, and they go to look you up, and it's not easy for them to understand who you are, what you do, why you matter, what your mission and vision for life is, they're going to go do something else. Like, you want to convince people you're undeniable. You don't want to give them a reason to say no. So we've done this. There was a nonprofit organization in Europe who has done great work, but their founders hadn't always been very public. And they hadn't really organize who they are, what they've done, what their successes are. They had those things and they had captured them. It just wasn't easy to find. So it's another really easy PR strategy, communication strategy, is get the story together and then make it easy to understand. And if you'll allow me, the last communications PR strategy I would say that female entrepreneurs and founders should use is fight. If you have an inner voice that says, I'm not there yet, I need to keep my head down and keep doing work before I start talking about myself, fight that voice and just start. Just reach out. So much of communications and PR is reaching out to people with platforms and offering to help. You reach out to an event organizer. Do you need a speaker on this topic? I'm happy to help. Reach out to a podcast host. I see that you covered topics like this, but you haven't talked about this, which I'd love to talk about. Can I help? Reach out to a journalist and say, I see you write about these stories. If you ever need a source on this, I'd like to help. And just begin. You don't have to reach out to 50 people a week, even 10 people a week, even 5, but just begin. Because like I said, we talked about before, it's much harder to start the momentum later. Just begin.
I love that. I think that's really good advice. I think especially as females, we are more hesitant to talk about our wins, and we feel like we need bigger wins before we start discussing them. So yeah, just start talking about it, and you never know what angle might be interesting for someone. You never know
Yeah,
which journalist might be looking for someone to talk about or talk to that has a story like yours. So I
exactly.
really love that. I want to take 2 steps back because you brought up a really important thing when you said NDAs. So, what is your advice for females who are looking to get their communication strategy going in their businesses? What are the top things you think they need to think about and be aware of and be cautious of?
One of a few of the most important things that you as a female entrepreneur or founder need to be aware of to sort of do housekeeping on your side before beginning a PR strategy and before undergoing a communication strategy is a few things. And so one of the first ones is for you to get public attention, for you to be able to tell this story and capture your wins. You have to be able to talk about what those wins are. So what we've seen in our works, working with all sorts of companies, including ones led by women, they've worked with very cool companies. They've done amazing projects, but nowhere in their like initial scope of work, client services agreement, contract negotiation did it say that they could talk about it. They could mention that big company they worked with. They could use their logo with approval, right? And it's harder to go ask for that afterwards than it is to put it in negotiations at the beginning. So it's whatever contract documentation you end up using, make sure it has something in there that says, with approval, we can use your logo. With approval, we can write a case study. When we start working together, we can issue a press release, or we have the right to ask to write a press release. Anything like that, because it is harder to go ask for it at the end. That relates to NDAs. So when you start working with companies, they may say you can't disclose that you work with us, but often that's you can't disclose you work with us without permission. And I would say part of your own communications housekeeping is that should be in your contracts too. You should have to see if someone's going to say that they work with you or capture the work you've done together. You want to review it before it goes out, but also that it's not necessarily a no. Just because the company you're working with has an NDA doesn't mean you can't say, and can we approach this? All of these clauses and documents are really about protecting each person and protecting each entity. Starting the conversations earlier also makes it easier because you'll understand, why do they have an NDA? Oh, is it because a company they worked with previously put out a press release without approval and without telling anybody and actually shared something private, confidential that they shouldn't have done? If you don't do that, then you should be fine. First and most important things to do is put it into your initial negotiations and conversations. Have it top of your mind that eventually you're going to want to capture and say that you've worked together or done something together and capture that win. Now, they may not say yes, but that's okay. You don't need everybody to say yes. If you have the conversations earlier, it's far more likely a partner will say, oh, yes, we'd love to do this. The second piece of advice I would give to female entrepreneurs and founders before undergoing a public relations or communication strategy is carve out and be realistic about the amount of time that you can commit to it. And this is part of, I think, a larger business conversation. And we give this advisory a lot, which is communications is the act of working on and not in your business. And working in your business is providing that service that you're providing, like leading the company, like the stuff that makes you money, right? In the business. Whereas on the business is promoting the business, promoting yourself, becoming more public and more out there. And that is a hard switch if you're used to working in the business. So then we usually see a way too big of a swing the other way to say, no, I can do this for half of the week. 10 hours a week, a full day a week? And the answer is absolutely no, you cannot. You will disappoint yourself. Be honest. What amount of time can you commit to working on your business? Is it you can spend 30 minutes a day, like liking and posting on LinkedIn? You can do one podcast a month. You can go to one conference a quarter because otherwise you're too busy. Like we said, just start doing anything, but be realistic. Because when you start doing communications and PR, you start involving legitimizers, you start involving other people and other people's platforms. If you say to a podcast that you can do it and then you flake, that is negative for your PR and communication strategy. If you say you can go to a conference and speak and then you can't, negative for your PR strategy. And that they will remember that. You'll start to get a reputation for it. So carve out the time and be realistic about how much time.
I think that's really good advice because oftentimes, especially initially, you get so excited in the idea of, oh, my brand is out there and my business is growing and people are talking about me. But it does take a lot of
Exactly.
time. It really does. And, especially if you are a small business and, you're probably wearing multiple hats and doing multiple things at the same time, that quick interview, you're not realizing, there's the prep for the interview. There might be
Yeah.
research. There might be things that you need to go over to make sure that you're confident enough, especially when you're starting off initially. There might be some media training involved,
Mm,
depending on what is required. So I
yeah.
think that's something that's also really good. And I think this is why an agency is important, because a lot of times, if you are just trying to do it yourself, which is possible, but you don't get the full understanding of what it all entails. And I think it's good to have an agency to, first of all, manage the queries and all the back and forth setting up interviews, which can be a nightmare, and then also helping you manage realistically, like, okay, have you thought about how long this is actually going to take? Have you thought about what this all entails? um, and yeah, I think that's really good advice, to be realistic about how much time you can invest in these
Exactly.
activities.
I like what you said, Alexia, as well about hiring, bringing on an agency. And I think your job as a founder or as an entrepreneur is to steer the ship,
Mm.
right? You've created the company, you know the product, you know where you want to go, and steer the ship. So it also means, like, at the beginning, you might be a one person sailing boat where you are doing everything. I get it and I appreciate it, which means what percentage of time can you spend on something else? But then also, you need to be able to delegate. So as you get bigger and more successful, bringing on a hire or a freelancer or a virtual assistant or an agency, you give them the direction you're going, and then they should be able to do the work that helps you get there.
So let's maybe talk a little bit about return on investment, because anyone who is running their own business, or any business, the one challenge that the publicity team or the communications team is always faced with is, what's the return on investment? So, and sometimes it's not so clear cut to measure these things. So how would you explain to someone who's listening right now, who's thinking, this is going to cost me money, and am I really going to be able to see the return on investment? Just talk us through a little bit about how you normally discuss this with your clients.
I love this question, Lexi, because return on investment is so important when you are a founder, an entrepreneur, or an employer, right? You have to get something for the money that you're investing. And unfortunately, I don't think PR and communications has always had the best reputation with ROI. It's always been the domain of marketing, right? Marketing has tracking and cookies and a pipeline. You can see we spent this amount on ads and we got this amount of business, therefore our ROI is X. Wonderful. And whereas communications doesn't have that because we don't control the platform, right? We know how many viewers a podcast has. We know how many people probably go and read that news outlet, but we can't say this many people read it. And of those people, we track them via their cookies to our site where they did X. So if you can't do that, how on earth do you determine ROI? Good question. I think ROI often is thought about as how much money have we gotten in return for the money that we've spent. One of the best ways for you as a founder entrepreneur to decide if your communication strategy or agency or person is giving you ROI is, are they being responsible with the investment, right? So we don't always just have to depend on how much money is coming through the door. Is the person I'm working with understanding that they're a cost center and coming to me with cost effective suggestions? That is one of the best ways to get a sense if you're getting good ROI, because they're already trying to spend less of your money. And there's a few red flags or green flags you can look at for this. But one of them is there's so many opportunities in PR and communications that don't require extra payment. That's when you start getting into marketing. You can speak at an event without paying to speak at an event. You can be interviewed without paying for that interview. You can be in a podcast without paying for that podcast. You can have your article placed without paying for it. You can also pay for these things. But anyone who's helping you, who's only coming with paid suggestions, be wary. That's one of the first ways that I think you can tell good ROI from communications. The second way that you can tell good ROI from communications is, again, if you're the founder, you're steering the ship. This is a question really for you. In your gut, is the ship feeling faster? Is it easier to maneuver? Are you navigating to where you want to go? Do you have the support? And is your communications team a part of that support? Because unfortunately, we will know, it's often you can't know if your story that you got in TechCrunch is then what brought in that investment of 5 million. You being on that podcast is then what got you speaking at that event, which then got you your big new customer, right? People don't do that. And also in new business, you're not trying to figure out, and where did you hear about us from? You just want to close the deal. But as a founder and entrepreneur, you will know that you came out of that investment meeting and it went better now because you have a press slide that shows you everywhere you've been interviewed, right? Or you know that your agency or your freelancer got you a speaking opportunity and it came after your podcast, and then you met somebody there. So the gut question is for you is, are the things that they're bringing to the table making it easier for you to do your job? And the third and probably most obvious example of whether your communications is giving you ROI, maybe I should have started with it at the beginning, is a binary yes or no. Are there results? Is there return coming from your communications and PR strategy? Meaning, truly black and white. Are you getting interviews? Are you getting opportunities? Are you getting published? Or do you have a department that is spinning wheels, but they're not actually getting you out into the public at all? Because those three things together tell you binary yes or no, is something happening? If yes, is what's happening seeming to make your life easier? And then it's making your life easier. Did it cost you an exorbitant extra amount of money? And or are they being smart with your money?
That's great advice. Absolutely. The results do speak for themselves. The interesting thing about public relations is you might think it might be a lot of fluff, but at the end of the day, how many articles were published? How many speaker events were you invited to?
Mm-hmm.
How many people are recognizing your company and your business? How much credibility. So a lot of people can spin a nice story to make you spend money with them. But at the end of the day, if you're trialing it and 2-3 months in, you haven't seen any results, then there we go. It's not working.
And ask some questions. And I think what you said true is like, are you getting links? Are you getting opportunities? It kind of goes with the second one, which is it making your life easier? Are the opportunities that you're getting, do they matter? Right? If it's lovely and amazing, you're getting all of these opportunities and stories, but they're in like supply chain logistics magazine. Okay, yes, true. There's more about me on the internet, but it's not in front of the people I need. So it's hard as a founder and entrepreneur, but it's ultimately your responsibility is to make sure everyone knows which direction the ship is going, correct them once or twice if they keep bringing you opportunities that are distracting. And then if they keep doing that, you have to make a change.
Okay, so my next question is, with AI and all of this emerging technology, what is the future of public relations for small businesses looking like, and what trends do you see in the near future?
The emergence of AI is going to be incredibly interesting for PR and communications as a whole, but I think especially for small businesses. And the reason why AI is interesting for small businesses is the story that we hear is, okay, you can't yet afford a PR agency, or you think you can't afford one because they can be cheaper than you think. But you think you can't afford one, you think you can't afford a hire. But you're like, oh, now I have ChatGPT. It can write a press release for me. I don't have to hire somebody to do this. Or it can help me write an email to this journalist. Great. And that is true. You can use AI to, I say, supplant or supplement some of this harder work of PR and communications, which is writing. Writing is hard. Not everybody likes it. It's like I said, when we talked about finding your story, find an external person to help you figure it out. It's kind of hard to see the data points for yourself. You think it will help, and it will if you use it as a starting point, right? Small businesses can actually start a very powerful communications and PR strategy if they're using AI as a starting point to then edit. So you're still spending time. It cannot replace a person yet for a few reasons. And it's the same with imagery, right? You want to start getting more attention. You want to look more established. You want to redo your website, but you can't afford a big branding agency, but you use Midjourney and a few tools to like look like the company you want to be. Amazing. And that's what we're all about, right? Like I want communications and PR to be more accessible to all entrepreneurs. You shouldn't have to hire a branding agency for $50,000 to do that for you if you're not at that stage yet. it can help save time, but it cannot replace time or replace people, because one of the worrying trends is using AI without an editor, using an AI without your guidance or somebody's guidance to say, is this going to work or is this going to actively harm my business? Because, like I said before, if you get really excited and decide to do all the interviews and you flake on all of them, that reputation will follow you around. If you have a reputation for sending a bunch of kind of AI gobbledygook, over the top, bad content out into the world, people are going to remember that too. So, as a small business, it is important to, you can use AI as a tool. It's amazing, especially it helps you keep costs low, but do not overly rely on it. And I guess that's advice for every business, although I think larger companies that have more money would be less likely to only use AI instead of people. But if I can give you an example, we had a reporter tell us, this was probably 8 months ago, who said, he'd been sending out Q&A to a few different companies for an article he was working on. And he ran his own questions through ChatGPT and then compared it against what he got sent back. And in a staggering number of responses, it was nearly the same. And then he knew, he's like, well, they're not actually answering my questions. They're just putting it through AI. And so it doesn't matter if your intentions are good or what's a journalist, what are you going to tell that journalist? Say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm like really stressed running my company. I wanted to answer you, but I just used ChatGPT to do it. Well, you probably won't admit to that. But if you have, you still wasted that journalist's time. So even if you have the best of intentions, it still could really harm you. And they're noticing. And I think it's only going to get more noticeable. So please use AI to then edit. Use it to break writer's block. Use it if you don't really know what a press release should look like, so it can give you a structure. You absolutely, absolutely have to edit, and you have to have human oversight of it. Just like we said earlier about, you need to romanticize your life. You need to take a picture of your coffee by the canal. You have to tell your story. If it's that important that you need to tell it before somebody else does, I definitely wouldn't let a large language model trained on the content of the internet writ large to tell you why you're unique.
Great advice. And I think people also need to remember, when you're dealing with journalists, the words are their forte. Writing is what they
Yeah.
do. They know, they can pick it up immediately if this is a genuine, authentic response. And it doesn't have to be perfectly written. They know that you are an entrepreneur or a business owner, they know that you're not necessarily a wordsmith, but the authenticity can be picked up very quickly by people who are
So
journalists and who are in the communications industry.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so quickly. I could spot it really easily, and journalists have told us they can as well. But I think it goes back to, better to be human. It's better to be
Mm.
original. It's better to be interesting. Why do you have to capture your story? So that way, if someone goes to look you up, they're like, oh, she is sharing. She's sharing insights. I can learn more about her. Wonderful. So it's better to err on the side of being human and a bit real than it is on being like too fake or like overly polished. It's just less likely it's going to get used. So again, you have your 30 minutes a week to spend on PR and you spend it on ChatGPT and it doesn't get used, no
It's a
ROI.
waste. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. In fact, it's damaging because that journalist will never come to you again for anything. And that's
Nope.
just the way it works. Rachel,
Mm-hmm.
it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us. I think we could talk about this topic for days on end. And I do encourage our listeners to drop some comments and some questions or some things that maybe we can deep dive into at a later stage, because I'd love to have you back. But
Love
where
to.
can people get hold of you? How can people reach out to you?
One of the best places to reach out is LinkedIn. So Rachel Pipan on LinkedIn is lovely. My company's website is Maneuvre.co. And then if you're passionate about, I think, AI at work, being a founder, being an entrepreneur, a lot of us come into entrepreneurship or pushed into entrepreneurship because don't like something. One of the best pieces of advice I got was, all you have to know is not this, right? Whatever is happening, not this, not DC, not a company. Just follow that instinct. So if you're passionate about that, but you also are maybe like me, a bit of a square, and be like, but I didn't know I was going to be an entrepreneur since I was 1 day old. I also run a newsletter called Nice Work, which you can find at nicework.email. And that's where I and a trio of amazing guest writers and contributors talk about, how do we create nicer workplaces that don't sacrifice drive, that don't sacrifice entrepreneurship, that don't sacrifice wanting to work hard, but also respect that we're humans. We should email each other like humans, and just generally like show up and build a world that we want to be in. So I'm always happy to like see you guys over there and read us over there too.
I love that. I'm definitely going to check that out. Didn't know that
Thank you.
about you, Rachel, and I'm going to go and see what you're doing over there.
Yeah,
Okay,
love
well,
it.
thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for taking the time to speak with us. And we are very excited to possibly have you back in the future to
Love
talk
to.
about entrepreneurship, females in this space, and yeah, just communications and how people can maximize this for their businesses.
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me.
For our viewers at home, please make sure to leave some feedback for us in the comment section. We want to know what you want us to talk about, what topics do you want us to cover, who do you want us to chat to, where do you need our help? Let us know. And remember, we are here to be of service to you and your business. Make sure to visit herexpatlife.com to see a range of our full service offerings. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok. Make sure to like and subscribe. And we are launching a very exciting app soon. I can't say much about it now, but follow us on social media and you will know exactly where we're going and the exciting things that are up ahead. So until next time, thank you so much for joining us.